So, we're now at part five of Jesus is the Answer. Now, when we're approaching a subject like textual criticism, what is done in modern academia is in the assumption of an atheistic, communistic worldview background. And what they want to do is they want to isolate the topic and yet still have these presuppositions in their mind. And that's kind of part of the club. But what we're doing is we're looking at these surrounding categories and then understanding um, the literary text in light of those things. And so we see all this evidence of a biblical worldview. So what I'm doing, and I'm also trying to transfer that over, don't get me wrong. If you are seeking truth from this, you'll find it. Okay. But nevertheless, the first thing on the subject of Jesus is that there is a religious need for Jesus. And not only for the purpose of a um, existential religion, but a holistic humanity, a need for Jesus to be the answer, for there to be a hero that will bring in a new age, a hero that will bring in a utopia, a hero that will bring in a millennial kingdom, a hero that will bring in heaven, nirvana. Whatever is in humanity, we long for that paradise. Okay? So that's a part of the situation is that there has to be an answer, and that answer is looked at in a heroic figure, which the world sees as Jesus. And there's also psychological evidence that I don't know if I got too deep into that, but you can find a lot of that in Jungian psychology and some other different groups when it comes to sociology and psychology. Nevertheless, so we start off with that. There's something about humanity that has that spiritual longing. It needs a Messiah, it needs a hero. Part two, we talked about the historical existence of Jesus. I brought in some extra archaeology and some extra history that's not usually talked about in discussion, along with a very large amount of secular history. But let's not also forget the history of the Christians themselves, which they had to pay for in blood. So, with that, I do believe that this will be a large indictment as far as the need for an existence, not need for an existence, but the fact of the historical existence of Jesus. This is not something that's too demanding for a person to have existed. A lot of people exist. So, now we have a need, and now we have a person, okay, that need is placed upon. And then we also talked about some of the signs of Jesus. People were looking at that time for a Messiah, and there were astral signs of that. We see that both with the emerging of a star near the time of his birth, spotted by the Chinese and the Korean astronomers. And we also know, you say it was like Julius Africanus, but there were two sources. But basically, there were reports by the Romans that at the time of Christ's death, the sky indeed turned to darkness. So we have somebody with these signs for his birth and signs for his death, and he's a real person. So now, we're starting to come across extraordinary evidence, and we dealt with in part three the fame of Jesus. Who else from that time is affecting our world today? Very few, if any. All right, so now we have somebody who is affecting the world, who was around at that time. And then we talked about the issue philosophically of miracles and the supernatural, and how, logically speaking, that's okay. It's okay because there is a God in providence to account for those things. But without a God, yes, the worldview doesn't hold itself. However, the science has not backed up the naturalistic worldview. The naturalistic worldview is supposed to be an explanation, but it does not explain enough. Naturalistic presuppositions do not account for naturalism itself. And there's also a contradiction between naturalism and evolution, but let's go a little further. So, the Gospels, if there is historical sources, and we do have historical sources, it's going to be the Gospels that is the most historical source. And I proved that with some different argumentation. And we also know that the Gospels are historical in nature. I didn't get too deep on the accuracy because it doesn't really need to at this point. We're not saying that this is the foundation. We're just saying that here is the fishing lure. Okay? These are the reasons that lead you to the point, but not the foundation of our point. We have experienced Christ. We've experienced the gospel. We've seen Jesus in our lives. And so we've found a place of faith. And everybody needs to have faith. Even if you believe in an atheistic worldview, it is believing in an atheistic worldview. It is a faith. So the question is, what do you do with your faith? Michael Jordan had faith that he could be a great basketball player. It helped him, work for him, didn't it? Yeah, faith is a good thing. Faith is natural. So then in part 5, we dealt with the, let's see here. Yeah, we did historical sources. Part 6, we talked about Jesus as a prophet. That Jesus functioned in a normal fashion as a prophet. That Jesus had some predictions that affected all of history. And that Jesus had some predictions that are still in play today. And so that those long-run prophecies will then back up his short-term prophecies, which are also backed up by the natural flow of history. Why did the world change so much? Because he was right and because of what he did. So essentially, we have gotten through those parts to help understand the full picture instead of trying to find one or two arguments within the whole. Okay, we're not trying to look into a little peephole. We're trying to see the big picture. They can see little pictures all they want. So now I'd like to go ahead and talk about the teachings of Jesus. How effective were the teachings of Jesus? So I want to talk about some of the greatest figures in world history and their response to Jesus Christ. These are men who didn't necessarily become Christian themselves. So it's interesting what they had to say about this man. Albert Einstein, famous physicist, considered by many the smartest man in history. He says this. He says, as a child, I received instruction, both in the Bible and in the Talmud. I am a Jew, but I am enthralled by the luminous figure of the Nazarene. No one can read the Gospels without feeling the actual presence of Jesus Christ. His personality pulsates in every word. No myth is filled with such life. That was Albert Einstein. What Life Means to Einstein, an interview by George Sylvester Varick, I guess, the Saturday Evening Post. Napoleon, one of the great rulers of the world, established an entire worldwide empire. Napoleon said this, I know men, and I tell you that Jesus Christ is no mere man. Between him and every other person in the world, there is no possible comparison. Alexander Caesar, Charlemagne, and I have founded empires based on what did we rest creation of our genius? Upon force. Jesus Christ founded his empire upon love, and at this hour, millions of men would die for him. Gandhi, the man who led to a unity and peaceful protest in an age of violence, helped unite the Indian people. A man of God, a man who has completely innocent offered himself as a sacrifice for the good of others, including his enemies, and became the ransom of the world. It was a perfect act. Gandhi's philosophy of non-resistance was inspired by the teachings of Jesus, even though he was not himself a Christian. Louis Farrakhan, one of the most famous figures in the Nation of Islam, and a African-American activist. Farrakhan says this: "No prophet before Jesus casted out demons that I can remember. Do you remember any of the Old Testament prophets casting out demons? Jesus was deep. There was something about the power in his word. That demon came out." Another quote from Farrakhan: "How can you be of Jesus Christ and afraid to speak his word? How can you be of Jesus Christ and refuse to stand up for his righteousness? And let everything and anything go on in the house of God, and you wink your eye as though you saw nothing." One of the world's most famous historians, H.G. Wells. "I am a historian. I am not a believer. But I must confess as a historian that this penniless teacher from Nazareth is irrevocably the very center of history. Jesus Christ is easily the most dominant figure in all history." Political thinker Jacques Rougeau: "Jewish authors would never have invented either that style nor that morality. And the gospel has marks of morality. The gospel has marks of morality so great, so striking, so utterly imitable, that the invention of it would be more astonishing than the hero. Shall we suppose that the evangelical history is a mere fiction? Indeed, there's no marks of fiction. On the contrary, the history of Socrates, which no one person is in doubt, is not so well attested as to that of Jesus Christ." All right. So, this is interesting because now, and this is one of the things that, what was it? Great things demand great evidence. So now we have teachings from this man that have moved people and have moved millions of people, even the people who are not necessarily his direct disciples. Very much touched by this figure. How many people in the non-Muslim community talk about Muhammad that way? How many non-Mormons talk about Joseph Smith that way? I'm certain you can find good things that they've done or good things that they've said. But to have this universal pull in nature to the Christian, to the Jew, to the atheist, to the pagan, to the communist, something special about this man. And not just the coincidences of the signs of the sky, but the signs of the sky centered around this man who changed history. And even the godless can't ignore that fact. Jesus is different. And as soon as we realize the simple fact of his existence, we just begin to tug at the magnificence of his person. We can wrap our mind around that. We have to wrap our mind